Welcome back to Look the Trader, and today we're here with CEO David Austin from Colonial Coal under the ticker symbol CAD. And yeah, could you please just introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. You've just introduced it nicely. Yeah, I'm David. And good to see you again.
Yeah, great. So let's just start with the first sort of question, because people are pretty much excited about what is going on with Citibank and why they effectively joined. And so can you further explain Citi's role and how the business relationship with Colonial came to be?
Oh, yeah. Let's say I'm gonna skip answering that the proper way, and let's say it was a merger of a bunch of things. We had some help from let's say some shareholders linking us together, but it also over a period of time. Quite a few of the people and we have way over 20 NDNAs now. I've had significantly over that. But quite a few of the people, including, for instance, CIL out of India, SAIL out of India, most of the Japanese groups that we've been talking to all had a relationship with Citibank. So, and Glencore's transaction with Teck is also being led by Citibank. Now, Citibank had also been involved in the past with Western Canadian Coal. They had also been involved in that as well, including the gentleman that's actually running the process for Citibank now. They have a history right back to Western Canadian Coal. So their relationship is, the fact that they never represent us is actually very good. We couldn't have expected better than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you remember last time when you sort of started talking about forcing a timeline of some sorts. Has this now changed due to the addition of Citigroup, or is it still sort of something that is being pursued?
It hasn't changed that much. One of the things that has changed, and it has got significantly better, is now that the relationship with Canada and China is better, now the relationship with India and China is better, and now that the election is over in India, yes, and now some of the companies that are not state-owned steel mills in India came through the door a week earlier than everybody else. Mm-hmm. But now all the other entities in India, like Coal of India, SAIL, and the state-owned enterprises, the restrictions that they were running under have been lifted. So that's that, and that some of those discussions are going to be taking place this week as well. The other ones who were not state-owned, well, obviously they've got a small advantage at the moment. The disadvantage is they don't have anywhere near the money that the state-owned enterprises have. Those state-owned enterprises, they can come with a bigger checkbook, which obviously is what we want.
Mm-hmm. And I got a lot of questions on sort of what is essentially Plan B, because people are asking, we're already in the second half of 2024, and why do you feel we haven't seen anything, and what will be a backup plan if we have to, I don't know, if after a few months or something it just we wouldn't get anything, and just let's say in the worst case scenario.
Well, there's always been a couple of plans, but I'm not going to shift off the first plan. The first plan is working quite well at the moment, so why shift off it? The idea is to get these assets sold, and then and share the money with the shareholders. That's Plan A. I don't see any point in doing Plan B. There is a different way of doing it, but it's still related to sell either one of the assets or both the assets. At the moment, we're looking at selling both the assets at the same time. If there's a Plan B, it would be then along the lines of, a company might not want to buy both. We might have to sell it as separate entities. That might fall into what you call Plan B, but that's really, to me, is all Plan A.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, you want to say that in any case, at least one such asset will be sold, or there would need to be some sort of structuring of the assets or whatever it might entail.
Yeah, that's a rough way of saying it. We are in discussions with different groups that have different capabilities. Like, for instance, I'll describe it this way. The Japanese traditionally have always liked open pit mining and have not been willing to fund mining. The Chinese are the absolute opposite. They like underground mining and prefer it to open pit. Indians don't care. They don't care which way you go. All they want is the coal. So, so it also leaves that open. Now, the important part of what we're talking about here is most of the people we're talking to at the moment, because of ESG issues, or whatever reason you want, is find that most of the companies now are very dependent on the financing arrangements coming from steel mills who ultimately need the product. So there's always going to be some component of a mining company looking at us with support from a steel company. And the steel companies are now looking at it. Are they better off actually owning the coal deposits, or do they make a partnership agreement with a mining company and then they fund the mining company to own the assets? So there's a different combinations of different transactions.
Now, given that you already sort of stated that Plan A is going well, at least in your view, would you say that there has been some sort of a bid or something already but it hasn't met any sort of approval from the board or something, and that's why we haven't seen anything yet?
I'm sorry, Lucas, but I'm not going to answer that. The way it's phrased, I can't answer it. Things are progressing nicely with all the different parties. I'm not going to step past that. I am pleased with how negotiations are going. I'm even happier because of what's happened in the last couple of days. Things have changed in Chinese groups, and some of the problems we were having with China, it looks like they found a way around their problems that will actually help us with what we were dealing with. So we'll have to see what happens with them over the next 24 hours to 48 hours. So I've got to respond to them.
And how has sort of your day-to-day activity changed now with Citibank essentially joining the process?
Yeah, it's changed significantly, and some of it I'm not that happy about. They've taken over an awful lot of the stuff that I was doing, but they have banking connections in China, they have banking connections in India, they have infrastructure that's built exactly for this. This is what they do for a living. I know one of the questions somebody mentioned to me, and I thought it was kind of funny because they were wondering if the people that are running this process are the top of the line people. Yeah, you don't get any higher than these people. This is the guy who runs this. Their M&A division is running this. This is his process, and they've got a lot of people. If you were thinking about it this way, they've got people on the West Coast working on this, and they've got people on the East Coast working on this. And I'm very impressed. This is exactly what they should be bringing to the table, is what they're bringing to the table. Now, I also know from previous experience, this isn't somewhere you can point a gun at somebody and say, listen, you're going to go in the next 2 seconds where I pull the trigger, because unfortunately that bullet, you're going to fire it into your own head. I'm not going to do that. I know from the Western economy that the process, when it starts, which it has, and if you look at Western Coal and NEMI, the irony is the timing is very similar. We went through this, when the people started coming, it's very similar. The advantage that I suspect is when you look at Anglo and NEMI, Anglo came in and they put an arrangement on the table that nobody else could go top of. It was basically $2 a ton, and nobody else was going to go over that. So they eliminated the bid process on NEMI, but the Western process carried on all through summer, right into basically the beginning of the first couple of weeks of September, then off it went.
Mm-hmm.
This time around, I think that things are very different. We've got probably, I don't know, maybe double or triple the amount of people looking at us as we had back then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot probably joined because of Citibank now, or at least the Citibank probably brought in a few new, I guess, parties that are interested, right?
I wouldn't say that's true, no.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think what they've done is they had relationships with quite a few of the people that we already discussed. Like, for instance, the Japanese groups that were instrumental in being involved in Western Coal and NIMI. Their banking group happened to be Citibank. Citibank also represents quite a few of the Japanese companies that are also buying out or are trying to buy out U.S. Steel. They also represent Glencore. They also represent Peabody. It's very difficult to look at any of the major transactions in coal and with the steel companies that Citibank isn't probably the lead banker in. So it's very good for us.
Mm-hmm. And now sort of looking at, I guess, adjacent companies and essentially the tech deal, now that it is about to essentially close, what could be the implications for us? Essentially, could it speed up the negotiations, or what effect does it might have?
It's difficult for me to answer that because my own thoughts are that everybody who knows they weren't successful on the tech deal have been aware of that for quite some time. Now, I think some of them might be holding back to make sure that our Prime Minister, who seems to be missing a few screws, they don't want to see him screw it up. So that might be holding some of them back. But if it is, it's not holding very many of them back because we've got a lot of interest from a lot of different people. I don't really think that Trudeau is going to interfere too much on anything. I think if he does anything, he's already done it with his interference in Alberta, and that really hasn't worked out well. So I doubt if he's going to do it here. Everything we're hearing is this is going to be a couple more quick ticks on the box over the next couple of weeks, and then it's how quickly they'll announce it. Whether they announce it the first or second week of July, it wouldn't surprise me if they do.
Mm-hmm. Could you also perhaps, I know this is probably a question you get asked a lot of times, and it's about politics and all these risks essentially. Can you just essentially talk about if some companies are waiting for the Canadian election to then do something, because a lot of investors are just worried about these politics and yeah.
That would have absolutely no effect on anything. No, I never crossed my mind that anybody's going to wait for that. Like, why would they? That's like throwing up a hurdle that nobody cares about.
Mm-hmm.
The worst we're going to have is Trudeau, and Trudeau isn't going to stop the provincial government. The provincial government, especially our premier, has been very encouraging on trying to get everything approved as fast as possible, and he doesn't seem to really care what Trudeau says.
Mm-hmm. And sort of based off the negotiations currently, would you say that the assets will be sold together or separately?
At the moment, together.
And how many of those over 20 companies have already completed due diligence and are big enough to bid by themselves without needing any sort of partner?
I'd say every single one has now finished their due diligence. Everyone has finished their site visits. Everybody who asked for reports to be done, and whether they used us to do the reports or got independent reports done on their behalf, they've all had them, and let's say all their ducks are lined up and we have ours lined up. Now it's a matter of who's shoot the first duck.
As sort of the time is passing and investors, rightfully so, get a little bit more impatient here and there, would you say that perhaps to entice a bit that it would be necessary to perhaps lower the price expectations, or how would you comment on that?
Yeah, the answer is no. I'm not going to lower the price. In fact, I'm going to try and get the maximum price I can. It really, if you look at it as what's been going through, including the tech deal, why would we consider lowering the price? I think the first person who puts the bid on the table,
it's sort of, sorry to interrupt you, but it's sort of more meant as for the first bid, I guess, or because a lot of people have the notion that you essentially expect for the first bid to be around $2 per ton and then go from there.
No. They can expect whatever they like, but that's not how the bidding process goes. If you went to an auction, you don't throw up the highest bid first. I'm trying to encourage the best price I can, but I do know that when the first bid starts, it's going to be lower than that. And some of the discussions we already had with different groups, it's going to be probably, realistically, if you follow what happened with Western Coal, particularly, the first bid that came in on Western Coal was completely stock related. The second bid that came in was completely stock related. And from then, it wasn't stock related. I would suspect it's going to be a very similar way with us again. Somebody will just come in and look at the stock value and throw a percentage bid on top of it and say, yeah, well, that's how we'll start. Their expectation of the success, probably they'll know that they won't win. And that's the problem with the bidder, is they frequently know that if they're the first bidders, they're the first people off the table. And that's a difficult one to be, unless there's a way of enhancing it. So obviously that's what we're looking at, is how can we enhance and in some way the word's not right, but entice the first bidder. But the first bidder, it's frequently in the past, it's always been somebody that wasn't actually talking to us. They come in and they're not necessarily going to be talking to our banker. They won't necessarily they might have their own banker, or they might just come straight in as a corporate arrangement and just put an offer on the table.
And sort of an interesting questions for the investors out there, and certainly to sort of set the expectations right. How can we as investors keep a proper timeline when we have no idea of the time frame of the process in general?
Well, I can't answer that because, quite frankly, I can't give you a timeline without actually stepping over certain guidelines. And the timeline is actually, I'd love it in my control. I really would. I'd love it to say, okay, you guys have got 30 days right from now to get to get done. I don't want to do that. I want the control to actually be partly something which we negotiate between our bankers and their bankers, which is what's going on right now. If it turns out that Citibank phones us up tomorrow and says, we've accepted it, or we're looking at an offer, they can't accept it. We have to. But if they phone us up and say, listen, this is where it's going, and we think we could open it up, well, that's what I hired them for. I didn't hire them not to take their advice.
And there was sort of one person asking about the last interview where you mentioned that China was the front runner and sounded eager to get a deal done. Can you elaborate perhaps what might hold them back? Because it's been around, I guess, 4 months now. 2 months.
I discovered that a short while ago. That changed in the last 24 to 48 hours. And I think some of this has probably been helped by Citibank, because Citibank also does business with a group that we talk to in China. They also have Citibank's represented them in the past several times, and so that relationship is let's say, has improved.
Mm-hmm. And are the potential buyers currently still requiring you and the team to stay on for a period of time if they were to take over, or is that not a condition asked for currently?
Practically everybody but one asked for that.
Mm-hmm. And yeah. And previously, some sort of there was a group that was, I guess, hired to help the bidders in their due diligence. Can you perhaps share what was the outcome of that? Did these groups still pursue further actions, or
Yep.
did they just?
Yeah, they yes, the report was beneficial to us. It was. There was nothing negative in the report. It went back to them, and yes, and they are the two that paid for that report are two of the groups that we're in discussions with right now.
Mm-hmm. And there has been a lot of questions actually about this one, and that's essentially if we were not to, let's just say in a scenario, if we were not to get a bid in 3 or 6 or 9 months, would you perhaps consider the permitting route because nothing would have materialized in, let's say, 4 or 5 years? Or what would you essentially comment on that question?
Yeah, well, when you look at what you need to do for permitting, we're doing that all the time. It's the application for the permit is actually going to be a lot more based on what size mine they want to. The environmental and all the updating to the permit and everything else, that's what we do every single day. It's not like we're going to stop doing that. So we keep everything ready for, let's say, Lucas, you were to buy it and you say, I want to build a 4 million ton facility. Can you adapt the permit so that we can file it? Yes, we're already ready for that. You'll be the one who's going to determine what size it's going to be, not us. So everything we need to do is already ready for that. You just got to tell us the scale.
And also sort of, I guess, an add-on to this one. Let's say you were to permit and you get a permit essentially. How would it be if you were to essentially, because let's say a bidder steps in and they think the permit is not meeting their sort of required tonnage, would it be essentially complicated to change it up to their needs, or how would that work?
Well, no, well, most of the people are looking at us really have looked very carefully at what the permitting situation is in British Columbia. Most people who speculate on permitting don't really, if they did their own review and look to see what's going on, they'd see that, for instance, the Tech Cominco, or Tech, their Windy and their Window Pit have been permitted. The Chinese group on Murray River, right immediately to the right of our property, they filed their application and permit. They got permitted. Colonial has filed another one north of Wolverine. They've applied for it. They got permitted. So permitting, a lot of people worry about getting permitted for some reason or other. They don't seem to realize that permitting has been going on the whole time. Ours is a permit. If you're doing a 1 million ton permit, like for instance Roman Trend, which is the Anglo, that's permitted. So there's an awful lot of stuff where you just say, okay, it's been permitted in the area. I don't spend anywhere near the time people worry about permitting. I'm going, well, permitting is something which we've done over and over and over again. Why all of a sudden would it be a big deal on these? Biggest problem we have on these is the size. These are not small mines. These are 4 million tons, potentially 6-8 million tons. But let's say somewhere around 2 million tons to 4 million tons is what you'll start off with. And in a few years out, you might be doing 4 million tons. If you're doing Huguenot, and Anglo was to do their applications at the same time, that could be a very, very large mine. You could, in conjunction with whoever buys out Anglo, is probably having a very good look at us at the same time, because that mine potentially has got the the ability to be one of the biggest coal mines in British Columbia.
Mm-hmm. And sort of a question on how the sales process is essentially, I guess, structured. Do they run through a checklist of items to sign off, or is it very open-ended in terms of how the negotiations are, structured? So,
Sorry, Lucas, could you say that again, please? I might have switched off for a second.
yeah, no problem. So the question was, how are negotiations structured? And a follow-up essentially will be just to sort of specify, do they run through a checklist of items to sign off, or is it more open-ended? If you can comment on that.
I'd say it's very open-ended. For instance, Citibank deals with most of the stuff, but occasionally, what will happen, and this happened last week, is the CEO of one of the big companies out of India wanted a very direct question answered, so he phoned me directly. And in the past, that we've been doing, Citi has now stepped in. So Citi takes care of, let's say, some of the minor questions. But if you're the CEO of one of the major steel companies and you want a more direct answer and you want a quick answer rather than going to the bankers, you'll just phone me directly and I'll give you the answer.
Mm-hmm. And also sort of a question about the process is, are the negotiations dynamic in terms of who's leading the pack, or is it always the same few countries, be it China or be it, let's say, North America the other day?
I'm not a big fan of watching horse races, so I'm more of a Formula One fan, but unfortunately, Formula One's kind of boring. But if you were to think of a horse race, this horse race has got about 4 horses, and each day, one is a nose ahead of the other. Sometimes it's body in front, but it doesn't seem to stay that way very long, and it changed again in the last 48 hours. So. In a sense, it's interesting to watch, but one of these times, one is just going to break loose and put something on the table, and then I have to catch up.
Mm-hmm. And given that the process is so dynamic and everything changes by the hour, as you essentially say, so what do you think might be the reason that there is no offer on the table? Is it, I don't know, the process, or is it the politics, or is it something else? What do you think might be sort of the factors?
I think you just covered quite a bit of it. I think the Indian government really reined in everybody from India, so that Prime Minister Modi didn't want anything interrupting or putting a bad light on, because Sale had some issues. He didn't want it highlighted. That's now been lifted. And now that that's lifted, I think most of the things which were, I don't want probably the biggest or potentially the biggest bidder not to be able to come to the party. Now, I've also said frequently in the past, and sometimes I take one foot out of my mouth and put another one in. But the biggest problem with the Indian companies is they always want to get everything as cheap as they possibly can. In the past, that's generally led to them being the first bidder. But they also have now learnt that if they're the first bidder, they don't work quick. So if they get the first bid in, and then the next bids come in as quickly as they did last time, they just can't react that fast. So by the time they have board meetings and approvals, this thing would be sold. So they're going to have to think about what's the process. And I think at the moment, there is more than likely there's going to be at least 4 Indian groups looking at this, and then we'll still have other challenges to accept from America and from China, but they don't have anywhere near the bureaucratic issues that India does.
And sort of a question about the PEA. So is there a concern for potential acquirers, given that the price of everything has gone up essentially since the PEA, or would you say that it's just not a concern at all?
it was always my thoughts, and it hasn't changed, that I do not want to put the highest price on the table in regards to the PEA. If we changed it right now, we could easily change our PEA and put in a coal price of $225 long term, and that would phenomenally change the value. But even at $175 a ton, we have a combined value on the Huguenot and the flatbed of $2.1 billion. I don't want to. I want the blue sky to be out there clearly for the buyers and for the board of directors of these companies, because we're not putting figures out there that are unrealistic. We've got very realistic figures on the table. We have a very conservative estimate on how much coal we've got, and we have a very conservative PEA. 175 right now. If you look at the last figures that I saw, there might be new figures, but Teck's figures on what they're selling coal for in British Columbia, which is a combined figure, which is their top coal and their bottom grade coal. The combined figure was $297 US a ton. Let's just make it $300. Well, $300 a ton. Our PEA figures are 175. Obviously, we've left a lot on the table, and I'm going to leave it that way because I want this process to finish quicker than later, and we need to do everything we do to help that process. So, no, I'm not going to change the PEA. Everybody looking at it, especially steel companies and mining companies, they know that we've done it and we've left a lot on the table.
Could you also perhaps comment on the BHP takeover offer for Anglo, and perhaps what impact it might have on us?
Well, it's definitely highlighted us, because I think there's so many people who've gone through the data room, and obviously we highlight the flatbed property and the Huguenot property. We generally don't highlight Anglo's assets right next door, but now everybody, they want to come back in the data room. If we give you a password to go into our data room, Lucas, and you go in, so you can't come back and have a look. So it has been somewhat interesting to see how many companies have now come back in and looked to see where the Huguenot property is in regards to the Belcourt property. Obviously, it's basically the same property. It's been very interesting to watch each company look at it, and it kind of gives us the heads up of how many people are really looking at Anglo. And it's interesting to see what Anglo has been doing in regards to looking at our assets.
And sort of a general, more economic question is, with the macroeconomy appearing to slow down, except in the United States, does this perhaps worry you that the parties will hold off on M&A, or is just coking coal too essential to, even in a recession, that there's essentially no way of holding it off?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's that it never comes up to us. Nobody ever. Everybody's looking at what they need, because remember, we're not in production, so they're thinking what's actually going to be 3 years out. And 3 years out, everybody's prediction is that the amount of coking coal that's going to be needed worldwide significantly higher than what the production is, and there's no way of catching up. There's just, if everybody in the world decided that they're going to issue permits and get into production for what they need 2 to 3 years out, there's going to be at least 100 million to maybe 150 million shortfall. Yeah, they're looking at those figures. They're not looking at what's happening right now.
And sort of, I guess, the last question, are there any additional factors or strategies that might expedite the sales process or improve the attractiveness of our assets to potential buyers?
The answer is yes. I think what's going on with Teck and what's going on with all the other things, all those boxes being ticked at the same time, I find that as a problem. There is no, every tick is a positive tick. There's no red ticks right at the moment. In the last year, we've had a positive tick followed by a negative tick, and that's been going on longer than I wish. COVID was a lot longer, but since last November till now, I'd say most of the time, every tick has been a green tick, and most of those ticks now, one more tick, and somebody's going to throw a bid in.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps any last words to the investors out there that are just waiting patiently?
Well, yeah, if anybody in the world's more patient than my wife, like she'd like to see this done. She for some unknown reason, she's under the illusion I sell this, I'm going to retire. I'm not. I haven't told her, but she's not out of bed yet, so it doesn't matter. I'll tell her later. But no, I want to get it sold. I have some plans I'd like to do, and I need a lot of money to do that. So let's get it sold.
Yeah. Thanks for the ending remarks, David. I hope you have a good day, and it was great talking to you.